We need to talk about this new film because it has overnight become one of the most controversial movies of the year. It's a true story about a man with Tourette's called I Swear. And not only is it one of the best films of this year, but recent events prove just how important it could be to raise awareness of the condition. Everyone is talking and commenting about this online right now because of what happened at the BAFTA Awards. Not just because the lead actor won the award for the performance, if only, but because of that outburst. We'll get into it because it's created a storm of media coverage and online debate, and not all of it is good. In this video, I'll tell you everything that happens in the movie and give my thoughts on it, including what happened at the BAFTAs. Especially because this movie isn't out in America yet, I felt like this would be a good opportunity for me to recap the movie for you and tell you what happens. I'll also tell you why there is such a real divide in how people are reacting depending on if you're from the United States or if you're from the United Kingdom, and why I think that is. It is perhaps the strangest twist for an Ending Explained video to not only be talking about the movie, but literally talking about a real-time update of what's going on in this man's life as of this week because of what happened at the awards ceremony. If you're new here, I'm Mad Morph. This is my movie club, so like and subscribe to join. It's where I talk about movies and TV shows that I like, and no AI is used at any point of the process. This content is human-made, human-written, and human-voiced. Yes, this is my real voice, not a robot. And if you would like to hear more of it, you can join me on my gaming channel or my podcast Down to Sleep, where I read books to you to help you get a good night's rest. Find all of the links that you need in the description. This is I Swear Explained. The movie opens with John in Buckingham Palace, preparing to meet the Queen of England to receive an MBE. An MBE is an award given to people the same way that people are made a Knight of the Realm and called Sir. It's the 5th ranking award, and it's for outstanding achievement or service to the community. It's a big deal, and John is panicking about going into the room, saying, "I can't do it," and asking where the exit is. His friend Dottie convinces him that he's there because he deserves it and he should go and receive it. And when he goes to the awards room, he shouts, "F the Queen," before apologizing, and the movie begins. You might think that this scene after events that happened at the BAFTAs has become almost prescient for John. And the truth is, as you'll see in this movie, it's really not prescient. It's actually just every day of normal life for John. We're then taken back to 1983 in Galashiels, Scotland, and we see John's life as a boy. His family life, his school life, his interest in sport, and how all of it is affected and some of it ruined by the onset of his Tourette's. He has uncomfortable blinking, neck movements as he struggles to do a reading in class. We see the other kids bullying him, his parents not understanding what or why he's doing it. And we see as he takes a girl out on a date to the cinema, only to see an advert for a chocolate bar clearly filled with some pretty subliminal sexual imagery to cause him to shout out, "Suck my," and his date is disgusted and leaves. We see him get into fights, to struggle at school, spit his school dinner at the headmaster and be punished for it, his hand whipped over and over again, with the headmaster saying to him later, "The real world will not be as sympathetic as we have been." The irony being that they haven't been understanding or sympathetic at all, but the sad part is he was strangely right, it would not be. All of this early part of the film shows us the complete lack of public understanding around the condition in the 1980s. Tourette's was first clinically described by Georges Gillet de la Tourette in 1885. It wasn't until the late 80s and 90s where public education and awareness was growing, and a lot of that is due to the man that this film is actually about. We watch as John ruins his sporting career by ticking while being scouted as a goalkeeper at football, which angers his father, and John spits food across the table at dinner. He's told to go sit in front of the fire while he eats his dinner from now on, so that he won't bother anyone else while he eats. His father would later leave the family, and John would blame himself for this, that his tics and outbursts caused the stress at home, and his mother sadly doesn't do anything to persuade him otherwise. We watch as a young John goes to the river where he likes to fish, one of the only things that seems to bring him peace, and he wades out into the river still clothed and tries to end things. The sad reality is that 1 in 10 children with Tourette's have tried to do this, and for adults the statistic is even bleaker, as it's every 1 in 4. But John survives, as he lays in the hospital bed saying that he just can't take it while being comforted by his mother, and we move forward 13 years later. We see John as a young man going to the supermarket with his mum whilst ticking. In the market he meets an old friend from school, Murray, who's recently back from Australia, and they go for a walk. John explains his condition and that there is no cure, and Murray shares that his mum has cancer with only 6 months to live. He invites John to come in for dinner, but John says, "No, you're alright," and Murray's mum, Dottie, leans her head out of her window and tells him to come in for spaghetti. You can tell that John doesn't want to come in for dinner because of his tics. The shot of him slowly walking up to the door, how nervous he is to go in there. Think about having Tourette's and being invited into someone's home for the first time, in the 90s when people were not at all very aware of it or understanding. And before John can even get up the courage to knock, Dottie opens the door to him and introduces herself, and the first thing that he says is, "You're gonna die of cancer." It's a tic, it's uncontrollable, and he can't stop himself from saying it. And Dottie just looks at him and says, "Right, nice to meet you too." And while John apologizes, Dottie says it's okay. It's the most honest anyone's been with her in months, and she invites him in. There is an immediate understanding from Dottie, and this is a true story, that this is what he said the first time he met her. We see the family waiting for John to join them as he hides himself away in the bathroom. He's trying to get his tics out, too embarrassed and stressed to join them at the table, to the point where he breaks the mirror. And the breaking of the mirror is significant. It's symbolic of the bad luck that befalls John throughout his life. But this isn't about the superstition being real, it's just about how John feels about the fact that he has Tourette's and his experiences with it. It feels like very bad luck. He often says in the documentaries, he wonders why him. He wishes that it wasn't. Dottie finds him sat outside and says, "Are you okay?" To which he says, "I'm fine, thank you." He apologizes for the mirror, and they talk a little about the medication he's on, with Dottie revealing that she's actually a mental health nurse. But Dottie looks at John and says, "I don't think you are okay." And this breaks John as tears fill his eyes. I'm sure we can all relate to not being okay sometimes and being asked if you are by people, or when that time happens where someone really does show that they care and recognizes that you're not, and how it feels to be seen by them. We have to magnify that for John because he hasn't been okay for the last 13 years, and I don't think anybody has really cared enough to ask him or check in on him and how he's doing at home. Dottie takes him inside and reheats his food, and he sits in front of the fire just like he does at home to not disturb anyone. John has also been apologizing every single time he tics, until finally Dottie seems to have had enough of it, but not at what you think, as she turns to him and says something which is one of the most important lines in the entire film. She says, "We have one rule in this house. If you do anything you can't help, you never have to apologize for it. If you're out in the street with people who don't understand you, fine. But in this house, where we know you can't help it, where we know that you don't mean it, you don't need to apologize." And John ends up moving in and living with the family, with Dottie saying to her family, "I've got 6 months left. I want to help him." It perfectly introduces us to who will become a very important person in John's life, as well as offering a contrast to his earlier family life. He came from a house that had no understanding, an angry father, a distant judgmental mother that treated him with disgust, to one of acceptance. While Dottie wants him to come off of his medication long term because she knows how bad the side effects are, John's mother gets angry with him and wants him to stay on them because it makes him more tolerable. She wants to make her own life easier, while Dottie wants to make John's better. There is also a scene of John and Dottie going shopping in the supermarket, just like he did earlier with his mum, and he has a tic and even hits Dottie in the face, but she is completely understanding of it. This is also a true-to-life scene. It's literally what happens in the documentary when him and Dottie go to the supermarket. We continue to watch the events and John's struggle through life as Murray takes him to a club for the first time ever, and he enjoys dancing and seems happy and even talks to a girl. But when he goes to get her a drink, his tic knocks over another man's pint and they get in a fight and John is arrested. This is one of the really important themes alongside the idea of Tourette's in the movie. It's the theme of relationships and finding love and acceptance. It's fairly subtly made important through the course of the movie. Just like with the girl at the cinema, John's tics have ruined his opportunity to get to know someone. We'll talk more about this at the end. Dottie gets John a job interview at a community centre to be caretaker, and he meets Tommy, played by Peter Mullen, who for me is one of the best actors working today. He is incredible in everything that he is in. The character, Tommy, isn't very well, so the process is about him training up someone to replace him long term. The two grow this nice bond through the following scenes that are pretty funny as John continues to tic through it all, and it's mostly ignored by Tommy, who just says okay and moves on. But when in the office, John's arm tics and he hits Tommy's dog. This changes Tommy's demeanor as he says, "If you ever do that again, I'll tear your heart out." It's subtly important, and it shows that while even someone who is as understanding and as kind to John as Tommy, there are lines that they won't allow to be crossed by his tics. He's able to accept, sure, this boy is swearing and that's fine, I can ignore it, it's not his fault, he can't control it. But the idea of someone hitting his dog is so offensive that he becomes angry and less understanding about it for that second. That theme is brought home even further with a hammer and a lot less subtly in the next scene. John ticks and calls a girl the S word, which I'm just not going to say because YouTube is very weird about filtering swear words and how it flags videos, so I'm sure you can imagine which one it is. And he says, "I'm sorry, miss, I have Tourette's, I mean no harm. I can't help what I say." But she doesn't listen to him and walks off angrily. John returns home to find a surprise party for him from Dottie and her family because he got the job to work with Tommy. While Dottie also reveals she isn't dying of cancer, they made a mistake, and she's going to live. They all hug, and it's very emotional, and Dottie gives John money to go and get takeout for everyone. But the girl that he ticked at earlier sees him, and 2 men jump him and beat him with a crowbar until he wakes up in hospital. It is a heartbreaking scene as he is there kind of ticking and moving his body whilst in a neck brace, and he can't stop his ticks even though it's causing him pain. And he slowly breaks and just says, "I'm tired of this, Dottie. I'm so tired," while she comforts him. It brings us, the audience, back to the reality of what it must be like having Tourette's and how difficult it is. The constant struggle to not say things, the constant reality of people reacting to the things that you can't stop yourself saying. Exhausting. We had a very nice few fun scenes with some laughs in it and some good news, but it brings us back down to reality with a bump. That every day is this struggle for John, and that even though he's pretending to be okay, that he's laughing at the funny things that he says along with the people who laugh at him, every day is tiring. We see as John has to have the chairs placed in a certain formation and kissing lampposts, which reveals his symptoms that are like OCD. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is not a part of Tourette's, but this part of the film actually educates us how often they are closely related, with up to 60% of people with Tourette's also having OCD-like symptoms. They are distinct conditions which frequently coexist, just as people who have OCD-like symptoms are more likely to have tics, Tourette's, ADHD, and autism. We see John taken to court for the fight in the nightclub, and the judge doesn't understand Tourette's and almost holds him in contempt of court and tells him to leave because he can't finish the oath. John can't get through saying, "I swear by Almighty God to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth," without ticking and swearing at the judge. Despite John's lawyer trying to explain it to him, Tommy ends up speaking up for him in court as a character witness and saying how great he is and convinces them to show some understanding. Later, John goes to find Tommy at his house but finds he has died. And we watch John attend his funeral but keep himself confined to the back because he keeps shouting and ticking. He wants to show his respect and he wants to be there but keeps himself away from the rest of society and isolates himself. Again, another scene which I think speaks very loudly to the experience in being at the BAFTAs and how people have reacted to it, but we'll come to it at the end. Dottie helps John get a place of his own, a council flat on an estate, but he falls in with the wrong crowd and they recruit him to deliver a package. Of course, he can't help but shout out what he has with him or call the police pigs when he sees them, and he is picked up and arrested. The twist is that they actually only gave him a bag of sugar to test him with, so he's let go. John becomes the full-time caretaker, replacing Tommy, and we can see in a beautifully acted scene how much that means to him when he's given the job. It comes with a place of his own, the same place where Tommy lived before, and we see John in the caretaker's office now with a dog of his own. A man and a woman come in saying the hospital recommended John to them, and he meets with their daughter, a girl with Tourette's, and they spend some time chatting about their experience. This is something that Tommy had been encouraging him to do, to try to reach out to help others, kids especially. And while he visits Tommy's grave, John says, "I'm doing some thinking. The fact that this girl said he was the first person she ever met with Tourette's. Can you believe that?" he says. He hosts a Tourette's weekend in the community centre for kids with Tourette's and their parents, and he gives talks, takes questions, and it's an opportunity for them to meet each other and be around others with the condition. We watch a montage as he talks to the police and helps them raise understanding with the very same police officer who arrested him earlier in the movie. We watch as John goes to schools, hospitals, community halls, giving talks and raising awareness and understanding. It results in him getting a letter from Buckingham Palace and an award of the MBE as we come full loop back to the beginning of the movie, and he accepts his award from the Queen of England. He visits his mother to show it to her, and it's alluded to that he hasn't visited her in some time and the relationship has become quite distant. They have a nice moment of slight reconciliation as she apologizes for not being better. John says, "I wouldn't have known what to do if I was your dad." She says, "I'm sorry," and he says, "You don't have to be." This is a nod to Dottie's mantra from earlier and how John has incorporated it into his own way of being, that when there is understanding, an apology is not needed. It shows that John understands and has compassion for the fact that his parents couldn't help how they treated him or reacted to his Tourette's because of a lack of understanding, that they were essentially helpless to it for many reasons, and it's quite a moving message when you think about it. We skip ahead to 2023 as John gets an invite to go to Nottingham University, who are researching Tourette's and doing a scientific study. He gets on a train and we see him shouting and people moving away from him. John has a device strapped to his wrist as part of this study, and it's going to see if it helps with his Tourette's. He's told to take a walk for an hour and come back. We watch as John walks around a quiet study area, not ticking, peaceful. He walks up to the university library, daunted by its sign. Earlier in the film, he said it's the one place he's never been in and doesn't go into them. It's too quiet in there. He's never felt welcome. But we see him walk in silently and without tics. When he returns and is asked how he found it, he says he hasn't felt that way since he was 14. Emotionally, he says he only ticked once. Barbara says it's a small study of 135 people, but 59% of them are responding similar to John. John is emotional. He says, "Can I keep it?" And she says, "Not yet, but you can take it home for a few days as part of the study." We watch as John gets back on the train, now with this new device on, a contrast to that earlier scene where people moved away from him. He sits in a booth with a woman, and he strikes up a conversation, asking if it's the right train, and they start talking. This is showing the device allowing John to be his more confident self, the same as he was at 14 years old. Near the start of the movie on the first day, he sits down at a table with a girl and asks her on a date to the cinema. He had confidence. We have watched as time and time again the tics have got in the way, first in the cinema, then in the club, and all through his life to this moment. Now with this device attached, he finds himself once again sat across a table from a girl and is able to talk to her. This isn't a schmaltzy romantic ending showing that John is about to find love. It is symbolic of how isolating it is for people with Tourette's and how difficult it is to find someone. In the documentaries about John's life, he shares how lonely he is, how all of his siblings have got married and had kids, and he wishes he could do that, but he's never been able to. And we get the words on the screen that John continued to help test the device, that new tech, medication and therapies can help many living with Tourette's, but that the most powerful support is education, understanding, and acceptance. And the movie ends with clips from the documentaries on John's life, showing the real moments that inspired the movie, including him and his dog, him hitting the real Dottie, and ending with him actually getting the award from the Queen. I'll tell you exactly what happened when he did in just a minute, but personally I think it's impossible for anyone to watch this movie or the documentaries on John's experience and not leave with a better understanding and education of the condition. What happened at the BAFTAs was terrible for everybody involved, but let's talk about it because some of the takes have been insane, and this movie and this video is an opportunity, I hope, for some education and understanding to be spread. So let's have a quick chat about what happened, what should have happened, and why there is such a deep divide between the UK response and the response of creators in the United States. At the BAFTA Awards, Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo were giving the first award of the night. They were doing the whole "and the nominees are" and standing up on stage and presenting. John was in the audience for the BAFTAs because of I Swear being nominated, which is based literally on his life. John had been ticking throughout the night, shouting things, of course, uncontrollably, and when Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo were on the stage, he shouted the N-word. Of course, this happening is awful, mortifying, and yes, offensive. First of all, it's not my place to tell people how to feel about that word or how it applies to their own lived experiences, and I'm not here to debate race and racism. We can all agree that racism is wrong, but this is not racism, it's Tourette's. It was a tic. That doesn't mean it's not awful that they were on stage and had to hear that word, and people watching had to hear that word. Anyone with a heart and a working brain can agree to that, and we can all wish that it shouldn't have happened. But here are the facts. The crowd and everyone in attendance had been made aware of John's condition beforehand, that things might be shouted and asked for understanding. He had already been shouting a number of things up to that point which were cut out by the broadcast. Some of these were innocuous, like shouting boring, whilst others were homophobic, as it was hosted by Alan Cummings. He even ticked and shouted out the word P-file whilst Alan was doing a skit with Paddington. These were all muted and edited out of the broadcast, and it goes without saying that the BBC and BAFTA absolutely dropped the ball on not editing out that word and causing this controversy. That goes without saying, and I think the fault lies with them. After the incident and John shouting the N-word, he removed himself from the awards show and left. But what is also a fact is that people with Tourette's cannot help it. They cannot help the things they say, and this is unfortunately being turned into a debate about something else and not about educating about Tourette's. I'm seeing a lot of brain-dead comments saying, well, it must be in his vocabulary for him to say it, or that Tourette's is people saying things that they really think or feel, which is an uneducated, ignorant, and misinformed thing to say about this condition and the people that have it. If you feel that way at all, please see this film, do some Google searches, read some books, watch videos of creators with Tourette's who are doing their best to raise awareness and educate you. Broaden your horizons and your understanding, because these are all people that will explain that side of things much better than me. I am not in a position to talk about your experience of hearing that word and how you reacted to it, but I think that any ire and anger should be directed to the corporation and the television program, not towards the man with a disability. I've seen takes from creators online in the movie space and just content creators in general that love to give their opinion and yap about anything that's happening to stay relevant, and they're saying that John should have been in a back room. This is the solution offered by some people: put him somewhere else to watch on a screen so he doesn't disturb others. I think it's even more upsetting that they say it like they're being gracious or doing people with Tourette's a favour. We're so kind to let you still attend this event, but off in a box somewhere where you're not going to disturb anyone, okay? I get that they think they're making a stand against racism somehow by doing this, while showing themselves to be just as ignorant and engaging in the same kind of misinformation and harmful rhetoric as racists, just against disabled people and Tourette's sufferers. There's even creators and people in their comments saying that people with Tourette's shouldn't leave their house if they know they'll say something that would offend people, which is a wild and insane take. Here's what I know. This moment has the power to go two ways. A bad thing happened, an awful thing, and we can use it to educate everyone who experienced it. Or we can make more bad things happen and we can spread hate and misinformation. We can choose to learn about Tourette's and learn to understand that there is no intent behind the words and make people with a recognized disability feel more welcome in those spaces. Or we can reinforce the idea that I'm sure they already have in their own heads that they're not welcome, that they should not be there, that they're a nuisance and that they're disturbing and offending to the rest of us. You'll see a very distinct difference between people in the United States and the UK and how they're reacting to the incident. Broadly speaking, of course, it doesn't go for everyone, but that in itself speaks for the work that John has done to raise awareness primarily in this country. Everyone of a certain age in the UK grew up with documentaries and revisits about him. Whether it's the 1989 documentary John's Not Mad made by the BBC or the 2009 documentary Tourette's I Swear I Can't Help It. For us, much like the girl in the movie, John was the first person that we met with Tourette's. We met him through our screens, and I remember him punching Dottie in that documentary. I remember him standing by a busy road and telling his dog, "Go on then," and encouraging it to run into the road. But luckily the dog is well trained enough and understands enough to ignore his tics. Maybe we can be more like that dog, because the shock, it grew my understanding, and I understand that right now the culture and some online communities are in that first state of shock. For a lot of people who saw that broadcast or that clip just being shared online, it might be their first experience truly of someone with Tourette's, or one as shocking as that in that circumstance. But isn't it important we use this as an opportunity to learn? The Brits seem to have a pretty good understanding and view of John because we grew up with it, and him. We have an understanding of the condition thanks to him. I see a lot of very big Tourette's creators now on TikTok and other apps, and there's even a TV show with a famous TikToker who has Tourette's, and we can only hope that this continues to raise understanding for this condition and the people who have it. But the reaction to what just happened at the BAFTAs would show that it has some way to go yet. Tourette's affects around 1 in 100 school children in the UK. And whilst in some ways there is more understanding than ever about the condition, we live in a time that is less tolerant than ever of offence and offensive words. That makes it a pretty difficult time to have Tourette's, especially coprolalia, which is the specific type of Tourette's which makes you say offensive things. The writer and director said, in 2025, there are so many more things that you can say which are explosive in a sentence. You can walk down the street and shout a couple of words. It could get you punched, arrested, beaten up. And I think that's what we're seeing online right now. We're seeing that he had this outburst, and right now John Davidson is being beaten up once again, but this time online. And I find that really sad, and I hope that the debate online evolves and changes and that people do learn from this experience. Where do we go from here, I think is best said by Dottie. When she said, "We have one rule in this house. If you do anything you can't help, you never ever have to apologize for it. If you're out in the street with people who don't understand you, fine, but in this house where we know you can't help it, where we know you don't mean it, you don't need to apologize." It's important to note that she said out on the street with people who don't understand it. Okay. I've seen a lot of wars in comments as some people think this movie is about the idea that people with Tourette's shouldn't have to apologize. That is not the point. That is not what she said. But what if we made the world like Dottie's house? What if we all worked to understand that they can't help it? What if we educated ourselves to understand that they don't mean it? Then we wouldn't be hurt by it because we would know that it's uncontrollable. And then they wouldn't have to apologize. But more importantly, they wouldn't feel unwelcome. As Tommy says earlier in the movie, the problem isn't the Tourettes, it's us. We don't know enough about Tourettes. And finally, what John said about meeting the Queen and swearing. He said, "I began ticking and shouting and I was absolutely mortified. I felt a hand on my shoulder, one of the royal archers, the Queen's bodyguards, and a voice said, 'Don't stress, she knows all about your condition.' That to me was huge. I've struggled so much with everyday life, with people misunderstanding. If the Queen of the United Kingdom can understand and ignore the tics and the swear words, why can't the rest of society?" I guess time will tell if that understanding will be there as this debate continues. It currently is on the biggest possible stage at the moment. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to watch another video, check out those ones on the screen for some more endings explained. This one a little bit different to what we usually do on the channel because it just felt like a really big deal at the moment and I wanted to talk about it and hopefully play my part in raising that awareness of this great movie, which I think people will enjoy, and for some compassion and understanding because I've found the whole thing this week pretty upsetting, to be honest, how people have responded to it. Find the rest of what I do in a link in the description, including my gaming channel, my podcast where I read audiobooks to help you sleep, and I will see you next time. Good night.